And the next mailbag section, we start now. First one comes from Little G. Same here with the labeler. They're a Lifesaver. I agree with that. I have a TR8 and use Wave Alchemy transistor VST, so not sure I need the RD8, but they are such a good deal that I wouldn't mind one. We'll hold on to see if the 606 claim materialises. And this was in response to the arrival of the RD8 SMR that I did middle of January 2020. And what I have to say about labellers is I think every musician should have one. And the reason why I say they should have one is A, they're not expensive. They're about, well, my one was about £30 UK, so I suspect that's probably about the same. My experience is dollar for pound, so about the same. And you can just print a label and stick a label on everything in the studio so that you know where it comes. And believe me, having had to reset a studio up with things that were not labelled, it becomes a real pain trying to work out which plug is associated with which particular instrument and which transformer. And with transformers, you need to be really careful because it can have the same adapter on the end but be pumping out different voltages. Could be pumping out AC voltages, could be pumping out DC, mainly DC, but 9 volts, 5 volts, 12 volts, 18 volts. Yeah, you see what I mean. On the subject of whether VST can perform the same function as hardware, well, we could have this debate for days, if I'm honest. And I'm not a VST person. I have VSTs, they're loaded on my machine, and I use them where I need to use them. But would I go for the original instrument over the VST every single time if I had the option? Now, sometimes you just don't physically have the option, as in you're traveling or you're away from wherever, and sometimes you just can't afford the legacy, and the VSTs are a very, very good substitute. But for me, I'm old school. I like to feel the instrument, fiddle with the knobs, press the buttons, play the keys, move the faders. For me, it's all about connection with the instrument, as opposed to I don't feel connected to the VST. Now, people will turn around and say, well, you're just creating music. Well, you are, but for me, it is that connection with the keyboard and understanding how the keyboard works rather than just producing music and plugging in a VST to get a particular sound. I'd rather fiddle with the instrument to get the sound. That's kind of my take on this. Lots of other people have lots of other ideas about VSTs and physical instruments, but that's where I am. Okay, the next one comes from Gary Robinson. And he writes, on a completely different note, I recently switched on my JX3P, another keyboard blast from the past, for the first time since 2014, to find that all my user presets that have been replaced by what seems to be empty default presets. I've owned the unit for about 25 years, it's been really well looked after, it's in perfect working order apart from the preset issue. Do you think they are likely to be somewhere in there somewhere, or is it some kind of, apologies, lack of correct technical terminology, memory chip that might have failed? If only there was a way to transfer the JX3P presets over to the JX03. Cheers. So this is in response to a mailbag item about the XM sequencing, Korg still stands up, audio quality and MX1 sample rate, which is something else Gary's been commenting on. And I've got to be honest, Gary, this stinks of battery failure. If I'm honest, it really does stink of battery failure, especially if it's been in storage for 5 years. So it looks like it's a case of getting the screwdrivers out. And as I don't have a JX3P, I can't point you to a video about how to change the battery. But somewhere up here, a battery will appear. And it's not a standard coin cell battery like on a lot of other synthesizers. Even with coin cells with solder tags on them, it's not that style of battery. It's one of the little round, and you'll see it on the screen anyway, it will be up on one side or the other. It's one of those little round cylinder style batteries with a solder tag on each end. So it's about 1 centimetre long, and you basically will have to desolder the old battery from the keyboard and soldering a new one. One of the things that's very important, I didn't write in my reply to you actually, Gary, but I'm going to put it on the video, is these things are notorious for leaking. So you might find that when you get in there, it's leaked. So I suggest you do it quickly, get inside quickly, have a look at it, and if necessary, get the isopropyl alcohol out, and you may need to neutralize the battery acid on the board. Something that probably needs to be looked at quite quickly. In terms of moving stuff to the JX3P, sorry, the JX03, my understanding is if you take a sysx dump from the 3P, you should be able to load that sysx dump onto the 03. Now, I haven't done that on mine, purely because I don't have a 3P to download stuff from to put onto the 03. But if it follows the same principles that the D05 followed, you can download and reload all the data, all the presets and user patches that you've made on the D50 onto your D05. And I understand it does follow that basic principle. So hopefully that's the way to do it. And the next one, again from Gary, but this is the MX1 query that I just said, was in response to the same video as the previous one, the XM sequencer Korg still stands up, audio quality, MX sample rate. He writes, hey mate, I managed to spend some time at the weekend trying to sort out the problem with my MX1. It turned out the complete audio 6 was actually at fault. For some reason it was switching between 44.1 kHz and 48 kHz sampling rate. I've not managed to get it to sit at 44.1 permanently yet, but I know at least I can simply switch it back to 44.1 in complete audio control panel, which is much more convenient than having to continue to reconfigure the MX1. So I'm calling this out not because Gary has found the answer to the problem, because it is a fairly big issue in the excuse me. As I said, I've had a cold all week, so I'm getting the remnants of it. It's a fairly big issue in the digital audio world, and that is called rate mismatch. Okay, so what Gary's called out is the fact that he's got an instrument that is trying to send in a sample rate of 44.1 kilohertz, and he's got a DAW that is receiving at 48 kilohertz. Basically, they're mismatching, and because this audio stream is not matching with this audio stream, the whole thing doesn't work. And one of the biggest problems you've got now is that for a lot of digital equipment, depending on the age of the particular equipment that you're working with, you could be working with sample rates of 24 kilohertz or 24 point something. I'm not looking at my notes. 24 kilohertz, 44.1, 48, and 96. Okay, so there's a range of sample rates that these things can run at, and there's also a range of buffering that these things can run at. And basically, if you get the sample rates of the instruments and the sample rates of where they're going to wrong, everything will cease to work properly, and you will be absolutely baffled why you can't get things to work. Now, Gary's issue is he can't understand why the MX1 wants to keep resetting itself from 48 kilohertz back to 44.1 kilohertz, and nobody seems to be able to sort of give an answer on that. But it highlights a very, very important point in digital audio recording, in that if you have the sample rates out of whack with each other, you're in for a whole heap of pain, and it may take you a long time to work out what's going on. So if one thing is not talking to another thing, first things to check: drivers, sample rates. Okay. But it's a good spot, and I think it was worth a shout on the mailbag. And the last one for this section from Bruce, and I quite agree. The Korg T1 has been the keyboard workstation which owners keep forever. Yeah, I mean, that's very true. They don't come up very often. The library of sounds for T1 has been grown due to energetic researches. The maintenance videos that you've done, John, are essential for the longevity of the instrument. Well, thank you, Bruce. The maintenance videos that I did were actually my journey to restoring my Korg T1 to rude health from when I bought it. Now, I have to be honest and say that my Korg T1 wasn't completely dead. But there were a number of things that had to be done to it to make it work properly. And I have to honestly say that the new screen I put in the Korg T1 was utter godsend, because the old screen, the old sort of green, black on green screen, is horrible. And then the white on the blue that I've got on there is so readable and so easy to use. But as you know, I love the workstations the Korg produced. The T1 is a special place, not as functional as the Kronos or the Oasis, but the sounds are solid and full spectrum. That's the bottom line. It's the bottom line with all the Korg workstations. The M1 was good. The Korg T1 built on it. The Triton, the Trinity built on those. The Oasis is just a different beast all entirely, and the Kronos came off the whole same lineage as the Oasis. So the sort of the whole way there they construct their sounds and the spectrum. And I also think that the T1, was so well built that it still holds up against a lot of the new synths that come out in terms of what it is able to do and how it is able to do it, and the keyboard feel and that sort of stuff. But I have to be honest and say the keyboard's built like a tank. Moving the keyboard is a two-person affair. I've moved the keyboard on my own, and I have to be honest and say it's a big old lump to lump around. And it's not so much the heaviness. It's 35 kilos, the keyboard, and there's a big lump of wood and there's a big metal frame around the keyboard. If you look inside it, but it is big. It's like the A80. The A80 is the same. That's a two-person affair. This is a two-person affair. The keyboard itself is big. It's wide. It's a span for someone like me to be able to lift it up like that. So you end up lifting it up like that and over your belly, and I've got a belly, so it's not flat. But it is a two-person affair, and I have to be honest and say that. And again, I've said this before. I said this in something else. I like the fact that on top of the keyboard itself, you have the spaces to the left and the right, and you can put your computer and controllers and that sort of stuff. So for me, the T1 is actually a very, very good composing, noodling workstation if you're writing or doing stuff like that, because of the space and the size of the keyboard and the footprint. It's not for everyone, but I think most people who have owned a T1 will probably attest to the fact that it has a place. The other keyboards also have a place, but they're for doing different things. The T1 is just a great work space.
Remember, hit that like button if you like what you saw. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified about more rants, more mailbag, more questions and answers, and more videos about this sort of stuff when it's loaded to the channel. Until next time, bye-bye.